Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on nonverbal communication. And I've entitled it "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of Nonverbal Communication." Now, in describing it that way, I don't want to be negative, but I'm going to outline some of the common mistakes people make nonverbally and the way they can correct it, or an improved way of using their nonverbal communication. Now, in this webinar, it's mostly around your communication. It's mostly around public speaking. It's mostly around presenting. So I'm not going to teach you how to tell if someone is lying or being untruthful from their facial expression. That is a different level of nonverbal communication. This is how you can be a more effective presenter, speaker, trainer, facilitator, chairman of a meeting through your non-verbal communication. So Peter Dew's my name. I'm a corporate communication and public speaking expert, and one of my passions is helping people get their non-verbal communication to be congruent and in line with what they're saying. Those of you who've just joined us and first timers, please ask questions, type into the dialogue box at any stage, take notes and apply the knowledge that I'm going to share with you to your own personal experience. Is there something that you've done in the past that you've just learned and could change? Do you have a presentation you're planning to do that you can make sure you incorporate some of these tips? So it's not about what I say today, what I share with you today. It's about what you do tomorrow. It's about what you do next week that will really elevate and improve your presentation skills from a non-verbal point of view. What am I going to cover? I'm going to talk about your stance on stage, your gestures, which is mostly your hands, the use of the platform, this is the space or the stage, your eye contact, what to do with your eyes, and of course your voice. And I'm not talking about the words, which is verbal. I'm talking about the other components of your voice, which will make you really effective, really confident, or if used poorly, will detract from your credibility. So these are the 5 things I'm going to focus on in the 30 minutes. Ask questions as we go. Don't wait for me to stop and pause, although I will stop and pause. Just write in the dialogue box and say, hey, what about this? How does this work? Stance. So I'm going to start off with the bad and the ugly. So some stances to avoid are what we call passive stances. And the passive stance non-verbally says, I'm shy, I don't want to be here, get me out of here. And there's the classic fig leaf, there's the hands in the pockets, there's the shoulders dropped, there's the looking small. Those of you who've heard me speak before will know I talk about Amy Cuddy, and Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y, has done a really great TED Talk, and she talks about how your body language determines who you are. And she encourages you not to do small, passive body language, fig leafs, the reverse fig leaf, so, hands behind back, but once again, dropping the shoulders, looking small, being really shy. So first thing to avoid when you stand on stage in front of a group of people, do not do the fig leaf. Do not do any of these passive stances. The second stance to avoid is what's called the aggressive stance. This one on the right with the hips on your shoulder. This is called the power pose. Now, Amy Cuddy talks about doing power posing before you go on stage, but when you go to a meeting, when you go to a job interview, when you present, and that is your predominant stance, you are seen as aggressive. This one is particularly seen as closed. So arms folded in front of you is seen as closed to new ideas, maybe set in your ways. But understand, if this gentleman was an audience member and I was looking at him, I would not assume that he's closed. This is also a very comfortable way of putting your hands, putting your arms. As a speaker, facilitator, trainer, I'm just suggesting if you can avoid this as one of your resting positions, then you will look more neutral. You will look more credible and less closed or less aggressive. And this one behind the back, not passive behind the back, but up around the midriff of the back, this is called the Sergeant Major. So the person who walks across the stage with his arms behind his back parallel, it's almost like they are inspecting the troops. Sergeant Major. So here's 3 examples of stances that are seen as possibly aggressive. The other one that I see in conjunction with the folded arms is people, and if this is the shoulders, and excuse my drawing, and this is your torso, people stand really wide. And this is normally with a hard hat on in the mining sector, and they're doing a pre-start, a safety meeting, and they stride as wide as they can with their arms folded, and that is very aggressive. Generally, your legs, your stance, should be no wider than your shoulders. Around about hip width is my preferred stance in terms of width when I'm standing still, and I try and avoid the crossed arms so that I'm not seen as closed. So there's just some aggressive stances that you can avoid. So here's a neutral and confident stance. There's 2 ways. One is in line parallel to your midriff, your belly button, and your mentor to watch would be your weather presenters. And this gentleman could be a weather presenter for all we know. He's standing there with his hands parallel to the ground around his belly button. He's holding a pencil, which I wouldn't recommend, but the weather presenters do hold their clicker as they move the synoptic chart forward, or as they talk about a cyclone forming off the northwest of Western Australia. This one is also a very confident stance. It's the palms up, it's approachable, and they're also drawing using a flip chart with the other hand. The other confident neutral stance is when you drop your arms by your side. So by your side or parallel to the ground, to your belly button, are 2 of the recommended neutral stances. Of course, you're going to gesture and you're going to move your body as you present, but when you're just resting, avoid passive. Don't walk on stage passive. Avoid aggressive. Don't do Q&A with an aggressive stance. Adopt a neutral stance. It makes you look more confident, makes you look more credible. All right. Another thing with stance, I encourage people to get out from behind the lectern. So try and avoid this gentleman here on the left is doing lectern lean. The lady down the middle is smiling, very confident, but no one knows she's confident because she's hiding behind the lectern. And this one here is me standing in front of the room. I've got no barrier between me and 30 to 50 people in the room. There is a lectern off to the side, but I've left the lectern and I'm standing out and sharing my knowledge, my expertise with no barriers. Even in the big conferences, you can still leave the lectern. Now, I am PowerPointing in this presentation on the right, but I've brought the PowerPoint slide down. I've blacked the PowerPoint so I can walk in front of the screen without doing any shadows, any shadow puppets. So there's some tips on just using the platform and some tips on the stance. Leave the platform. Don't be aggressive. Don't be passive. Have a neutral stance. And if you're unsure what your baseline stance is, get some feedback. Video record yourself and assess, when I'm just standing there, do I look confident? Do I look aggressive? Or am I being passive? The next thing is your gestures. So the good thing to do is smooth, purposeful gestures, gestures that add value to what you're saying. If the words that come out your mouth and the gestures you're making are not aligned, they're not congruent, then your gestures override your words. So if you stand there with a fig leaf very passively and say, I'm really excited and pleased to be here today, we're going to have a great time, as you hold the fig leaf, no one's going to believe you, because your nonverbal communication is not saying that. So gestures, make sure they're purposeful, make sure they're in line and congruent with what you're saying. A way to grow your gestural vocabulary and make them more diverse is to practice in front of a mirror. And that way you can gradually grow the level of complexity, the different gestures as you're talking. See what comes out of your repertoire of your nonverbal vocabulary and increase it. Things to avoid in your gestures. Avoid bouncy gestures and repetitive gestures. So the person who just bounces their hands up and down. So if I just bounce my hands up and down, that is called bounce, and that becomes distracting. If I keep in my presenting, if I keep rubbing my hands around and around, like trying to get a genie out of the bottle, or as if I'm really cold, if I continually doing that, then the repetitive gestures, and it doesn't mean anything. Now, if I say to you, let's warm up our hands, or like a genie out of the bottle, and I rub my hands as I talk about the genie out of the bottle, then that gesture is congruent with what I'm saying. Our previous Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, used to hold his hands out in front, around his midriff, and as he was talking, he would bounce his hands up and down as if he was conducting an orchestra. That is called noise. So we make the gestures, but we don't bounce. One other thing to avoid is the point. Around the world, especially female audiences, are sick and tired of men, male presenters, who thrust the hand, the point, the finger at their audience as if it's your fault, as if it's accusing you. You can do a directional gesture by flattening your palm and pointing your palm in the direction. So what do you think, as opposed to the finger? So what do you think? The bounce for the visual learners is similar to the telephone ringing in the background when someone's doing a TV interview, or you're presenting and someone's phone goes off and people get distracted. That's literal and auditory noise. The bouncing of the hand up and down in time with what I speak is visual noise. The platform, number 3, the platform. Things to avoid: dancing on the platform. Dancing on the platform is when the speaker just moves forward and then 2 or 3 seconds moves back. And then they move forward and then they move back. It's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back for no reason. The other sort of dance is you transfer one weight onto one foot and hip, throw your hip that way, and then after 2 or 3 seconds you then transfer your weight onto the other foot and thrust your hip on that side. That's called hip lock. I've seen people that do a little square dance, move forward, to the side, back, across, move forward, to the side, back, and cross. Really important that you move for purpose. And the best thing to do is find that stance that you're comfortable with and plant your feet about hip width, certainly no wider than shoulder width, and pretend those feet, your legs, are tree trunks, and just put roots into the ground. And just stay put for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever. And then you would move for purpose. So distracting movements. This person here is obviously doing a little bit of a bounce with his hand. He's also standing behind the lectern. Don't bring anything up that you don't need. So this gentleman's emptied his briefcase on stage. The other distracting things are when people click pens, and I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I'm now clicking a pen up and down. The person who brings the pen on stage and continually clicks it. I need glasses. This gentleman needs glasses. The person who holds the glasses in their hand and swivels them round and round and round and round and round. All of this is distracting, so don't bring that on the platform. So stand nice and still, plant those feet, and only move when you have a reason. So the dance is a common mistake, a bad thing. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. This will drive your audience crazy. The next one is pacing. So you know I've asked you to leave the lectern, but now you're on the stage with nothing to hide behind, so people will see your dance, and that's one of the reasons people stand behind the lectern. They can do little waltzes, they can do little jigs, they can cross their legs, they can do all sorts of things, and they're protected by the lectern. But you're still putting a barrier between yourself and the audience. So when you do come out from behind the lectern and you're on the stage, don't do what I call the cat on the hot tin roof. The cat on the hot tin roof. This is just walking back and forward, back and forward incessantly. I remember a while back I saw a speaker, and I think he spoke for 45 minutes, and the entire 45 minutes they moved to that side of the stage, then back, then back, then back. Not once settling, putting roots into the ground, and just that incessant walker. This can make you really distracting. And there's no purpose. There's no purpose. If in your presentation you're talking about idle wandering, or you're talking about walking the Camino, maybe at one stage you might illustrate it by walking back and forth 2 or 3 times to let people know that you're talking about pacing or walking. But generally, you need to stand still. Settle, put those feet firmly planted, and orientate yourself and then only move for purpose. All right. Number 4, your eye contact. Another nonverbal. Where do you look when you're presenting? Some things to avoid are looking at the floor, looking at the ceiling, looking above people's heads, looking out the window or at the wall as you talk. Now, it's okay to look at your flip charts. It's okay to look at your whiteboard. It's okay to glance at your PowerPoint. It is not okay to read off your PowerPoint slides. Really, you want your eyes on the audience. So try and avoid these and make eye contact, genuine eye contact with the audience. So this means really looking at the audience. This means you're having a conversation with the audience. This means you're actually looking and talking to the people in the room. The thing with your eye contact is it's not only how you build trust, how you build rapport, how you come across as honest and authentic, but it's also how you read what's happening in the room. So my peripheral vision will pick up that this lady may be not engaged, and my peripheral eye contact will see this person shaking their head from side to side, not agreeing with me, in fact disagreeing with me. Now, as it was, we haven't started the presentation yet, and I'm just having a little chat with these two people. We've still got, I think, about 10 minutes before we start. People are still filing into the room, and I'm having a chat. But eye contact, people want to feel that they've had a conversation with you as an individual, all 250. So if you can make that eye contact really, really personal, and if we go to a bigger room, 250 people, when I look at this person here, I make eye contact, and they're at the back room, 15 rows down. The 5 people around that person, they think you're looking at them. So it's not that you have to look at every individual in the really large audiences. In the 20 or 30 or 50 size rooms, yes, you need to actually look at individuals. But when you go to the larger audiences, then you really need to pick spots in the room, pick an individual, look at that individual, and the 5 people will then, around them, will get the sense you're looking at them. But eye contact's really important, helps you build rapport, connect, but it helps you read what's happening in the room. The shaking of the heads, the disagreement, the people starting to fall to sleep, so you need to take a break, all of those kinds of things you pick up with your peripheral vision. If you're looking out the room, the roof, the floor, then you won't read what's happening for your audience. The final and 5th nonverbal communication is your voice and what you can do to be more effective. So the bad things around your voice. Using filler words. If you use constant filler words, and it's not just ums and ahs, you will lose your ability to engage your audience. There's a classic YouTube video by Caroline Kennedy. This is JFK's daughter, when she was being interviewed about possibly becoming a senator. Live television, TV program, and there's about 50 you-knows in 10 to 15 minutes of speaking. And some of the you-knows are 3 in a row. Now, I'm not talking about a card game here. I'm talking about, sometimes, these filler words, that we just, we say for, no reason, And what happened was after that video, everyone said that she's not suitable to run for the Senate. And she didn't. She didn't nominate. She got criticised. What filler words do you use? What's your baseline? I'm going to pause for a moment. Does anyone use any filler words besides ums and ahs? Yep. Sarah? Actually. Yes, I know. That's a bad one. And actually, I've heard some people that actually don't say much at all, but actually they think they're actually sounding quite intelligent. And actually, when you think about what's actually being said, it would actually sound better if they actually didn't say the word actually. Excuse me for doing that to you. Obviously, another good one. Obviously, what you need to do is come up with a solution, and then obviously as a team we can obviously work forward, and obviously we'll have some better outcomes, obviously. So I get caught with starting my sentences with so. So what I want to do now is, so let's move on. Like, yes, my young adult children use the word like very often. Like you should have been there, Dad. Like it was really good, like. So thank you for that. Avoid your filler words. Use pause, the power of silence. In fact, the pause is the antidote to the and the and other filler words. When you think about it, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say next. If I was to pause, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say next, that actually sounds more intelligent and more credible. We need to be comfortable with silence. We need to be comfortable with pause as public speakers and presenters. Breathing is really good. I wouldn't do your meditation or your yoga on stage, but one of the things with the resting position with your hand on your belly button in your midriff parallel to the ground, you can check whether your diaphragm is going in and out. That's deep, low breathing. If my diaphragm, if my belly button is not going in and out, it means I'm probably breathing up here, and my shoulders will be going up and down. That is nervous, high breathing high up in your chest, which isn't good for oxygen exchange. So we want that deep breathing. Breathing also shows, along with your use of pause, it shows that you're comfortable and you're confident within what you're doing. I went to an amateur stand-up comedian show last night. This is an audience member, and they're those people that are doing their second and third gig. And they're not professionals, they're just learning it, and you can see they're really nervous. They're fidgeting, they're not breathing low, and they're not comfortable with pause. Now, it takes time, but as speakers, if we can get comfortable with silence, straight away we become more credible and more confident. Change your pace, change your volume, and change your pitch of voice. So there's a summary of 5 things that, from a non-verbal perspective, can make you look really good. If you need my slides, you want questions, or I'm going too quick, let me know and I'll provide you a recording. So your stance, your gestures, the way you use the platform, what you do with your eyes, what you do with your voice, all of these things can make you look really good or sabotage your presentation. Quick soft sell. I've got workshops coming all around Perth, Darwin, Karratha, Bendigo, Brisbane. If you have any interest in growing your skills or you have any colleagues, feel free to share that information around. It's on my website. I'm not going to dwell on that. Next webinar, 4th of October. Should we reveal our vulnerability when we're speaking? Brene Brown, another great TED Talk. Is vulnerability a dirty word? Does vulnerability, our mistakes, our self-doubt, does that sabotage us as leaders, as speakers? So that's all for now.